Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'll give everybody just a second to connect right now. Awesome. So welcome to our NASPA Region 6 Careers and Student Affairs Month event today. We will be doing a set of different types of NASPA events online, and today we have Unveiling the Hidden Curriculum, Navigating Challenges in Latina Doctoral Studies. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to Mario to go ahead and introduce folks on our panel.
Yeah, thanks, Basilia, and thank you, folks, for joining us this afternoon. We'll go ahead and kind of give a breakdown of what we're going to talk about today, but then also introduce ourselves. And then after that, we did want to open it up and ask folks as well to introduce yourselves, since we have two participants, but also so we can best decide what to do with our conversation this afternoon, just because primarily our intent was to kind of share this information with folks who are interested in getting a doctorate and just kind of like the stuff that we as Latino identified folks experience as we are navigating and or navigated our doctoral process from the lens of being Latinx identified folks. And so we want to just make sure this is the best use of time for our guests, our participants today as well. So we'll go ahead and just we'll still begin by introducing ourselves at least, and then again, open it up to the group to introduce themselves too. So we just have a few slides that we'll go over, and then we'll jump right into the introduction. So just a little bit in terms of our background. So one of the biggest things as it relates to this topic is obviously this isn't necessarily existing in a vacuum, right? When we think about the overall experience of doctoral students, it's primarily in the context of a general pipeline or pathway for Latinx folks in the educational process. So thinking K-12 and beyond, right? And so I think part of that is as student affairs professionals, some of the work that we look at is within the context of, some of the facts and figures and demographics that when we think about US in general. So one of the biggest things is that we are seeing an increase in the number of Latinos in the United States, specifically that are college-aged folks. And then we're seeing increases of folks coming to campus and universities who are Latinx identified. The reality, though, is in terms of retention rates, we are still disproportionately graduating from our undergraduate experiences at the same rate as other populations. So that's one of the things to keep in mind. And then you move into sort of where we're at as student affairs professionals. So Latino folks are again increasing, but disproportionately being represented at more entry-level positions and being disproportionate, or there's underrepresentation at more senior level positions. I know in my work and my dissertation work, one of the things I recognized as part of so my dissertation was on the persistence and advancement of Latino student affairs professionals. And one of the things that they shared is that disproportionality, where we're seeing an overrepresentation in entry level positions, but not necessarily in senior level positions. And part of that in that conversation was the doctoral degree and, doctorate degrees being a huge barrier in terms of being able to advance to more senior level positions. And so there's also an underrepresentation of Latinx identified folks achieving doctorates in general. There wasn't a lot of data specifically towards student affairs programs, but if you kind of look at all this data in that context, one can inform the other that potentially there may be an underrepresentation in doctoral programs as well. So that's what we wanted to share with you all today in terms of some of the context and background. We will briefly introduce ourselves as panelists, and then we'll ask folks again to introduce themselves, and then we'll maybe stop the recording at that point and then determine next steps. But we'll go ahead and just introduce ourselves, and I realize that I've already started talking without doing that, so if we want to just go to the next slide. So my name is Mario Garibay. I am the Dean of Student Affairs at UC San Diego for Eleanor Roosevelt College. My hometown's up in California, which is in the Los Angeles County area. My original career path was, I think I went into my undergrad wanting to be a school psychologist. I recognize now that I'm not even sure that I spelled psychologist correctly when I wrote that in there. And obviously that isn't something that I ended up going down that path. So one of my mentors at the time, he informed me of student affairs as a career. And I was like, all right, like I'll try it out. I really enjoyed getting involved as an undergrad. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do next. He informed me of a master's program at USD focused on it. So that's sort of how I got into student affairs. And then so I did my BA and master's at University of San Diego, and then I got most recently my doctorate in educational leadership. And then in terms of my career path, I went from residential life and housing, so those were my initial positions, and then transitioned to the Office of Student Conduct. I did this like crab walk across student affairs, so I then also got involved in student activities, and then at that point started to advance in the field. So I got a position as an assistant dean of student affairs, and now currently serve as a dean of student affairs. So that's a little bit about myself. So I'll pass it on to the next person.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Belinda Zamacona. I use she, her, Doctoral pronouns. I'm it's weird. This is the first time as I was typing it out, like I always put like Acapulco, Guerrero, Mexico as my hometown, which it is, but now I've spent the majority of my life in San Diego, particularly North County, well, half and half North County and other parts of San Diego County. But yeah, so North County, I'll have to say North County by way of Acapulco, Guerrero, Mexico. My original career plan was to also be, I think I thought school counselor. So like you, Mario, I didn't know the distinction between a school psychologist. I just knew I wanted to work in a school. I had had some volunteer opportunities and an internship while I was an undergrad at San Diego State at a local charter school. So that made me interested in working with students, but I didn't want to be a teacher, or I was unsure at that time. So I thought I wanted to do that. And then I actually got to work at an elementary school, and I saw what school counselors actually did and decided that that's not what I wanted to do. And I actually finished a year of a school counseling program before making that decision. So that's what I thought I wanted to do. They mostly did disciplinary work from at the school site that I was in, and that's not something that I thought was particularly fun or interesting, or the type of work that I wanted to do with students. My current career path has been all of my higher ed experience right now at to date has been at a large public university at the University of California, San Diego. I worked for 14 years in student support services and very recently moved into my first non-student facing role in an equity, diversity and inclusion office at the same campus. So it's been an adjustment. And especially working with folks that don't necessarily have the same student affairs or student support or just like student development theory, all of that. So and I will say that it's been complementary. That experience has been complementary to be able to learn and look at things at the institution from a different lens. My educational path, I put in traditional was not the word that I was looking for, but somehow it made it onto the slide. So I went into my undergraduate studies directly from high school. I was an undocumented student in 2002, and that was the first year that AB 540, the tuition residency exemption, was in place. So that's the only reason I got to go to a four-year university right out of high school. And then from there, I had a 5-year gap, not by choice, but because I had to pay off a lot of private loans that my parents took out because I was undocumented, where I was working in higher ed. I was working 2 years at an elementary school and then higher ed, and then I went back to school. And then I had another about 4.5 year gap, and then I went back and got an EDD. And then again, so that was the same choice that I had with my master's program was also the same for my doctorate program, in that my financial and familial obligations were the only 2 considerations. So I didn't really, actually all of my educational path has been influenced just on family status and financial obligations. So it was whatever cost whatever was the most cost efficient for me that would still allow me to maintain my family obligations. I'm the oldest Mexican daughter, so many of you all know that comes with certain expectations, whether someone has explicitly told you or not. You are if you were the first, but if you are the oldest daughter, that comes with a lot of other firsts. So all of that influenced where I got my doctorate, where I got my master's, and then I worked full time while doing all of that. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I'll pass it on to Moy.
Hi, friends. Moises Alvarado Garcia. I use he, him pronouns. Originally from Fontana, California. It's about 2 hours north of the 15 in San Diego. Original career path, I was all over the place. This is what I graduated with. It was not my original career path. I think I started off as engineering, eventually found my way to kinesiology, and originally planned on getting a career in physical therapy, which didn't happen, obviously, which is okay. So for me, I actually started my student affairs journey after undergrad, after doing a lot of student affairs work as a student. I was at 2 large public institutions and worked within campus recreation, fraternity sorority life, success coaching, case management, until I made the switch very recently into a small private Catholic institution where I serve as the director of the TRIO Student Support Services program. So lots of winds and turns in the career path, but educationally, did 6 years as undergrad for a lot of different reasons that wasn't academic ability. Took a 1-year gap. During that year, I worked in higher ed and recreation, where I found my way into applying for a master's program after a year of work. So did the master's program for 2 years, moved down to San Diego for my first full-time role in student affairs, where I took another gap year and I started working and got that first year of experience under my belt. And then after that, I applied to get my EDD. So completed that last year, have been in student affairs ever since. And that's a little bit about me. I'll pass it on.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. I don't know why. But hello, Claudia, Pena, she, her, ella pronouns. Future Dakota. I have not officially defended my dissertation, but I'm hoping to December 13th this year. And so originally I'm from Desert Hot Springs, California. I think all of us wasn't planning on going into student affairs. I wanted to go into the medical field. And even after I did my undergraduate or completed my undergraduate degree at UCSD, I worked in the medical field for 2 years and I was taking people's blood for research. It was a lot of fun, but definitely didn't want to do it for the rest of my life, or at least like just work in the medical field. So I decided to go into student affairs and get my master's like about 2 years after I graduated. So like I quit my job and just went into a program essentially. And then after that, I came here to UCSD and I've been here ever since. I used to work in like the res life area when I was doing my master's. I did a GA-ship in res life. So I originally wanted to be in res life and then I very quickly found out that I didn't, because I did enjoy it, but it's a lot. And I also have 2 kids and they are a lot of energy. So I just wanted to focus on them a little bit more. And so, yeah, now I work in like student life, currently a student care and accountability specialist, similar to what Moises said before. What his slide said is like case management, social work, kind of getting students connected to needs or resources that they might need outside of the university too. I will be moving into a new role next month. And yeah, I'm going to be finishing my EDD. So my pathway definitely wasn't straightforward either, but in general, I think I made a good decision as far as like going into education, because I do feel like the most impact that I've made in students and like just like my own life has been working with students that have maybe struggled going into a 4-year institution and struggle finding their own path. And so I think in general, that's why I'm here today. So I will move it to Mario.
Yeah, so we can open it up. If you want, Claudia, you can stop sharing screen, and then Daniel, maybe we can pause the recording real quick as well.
When you're in a class and someone mentions the project that you realize was due and you have like a week, that's how it always felt, right? When I started, when I did undergrad, I did both my undergraduate master's degrees at San Diego State. In high school, I was an AVID, so that's advancement via individual determination. The college, preparatory program that starts in some junior highs, and then high school still around. So I was an avid, and you were supposed to apply to colleges and universities, and do Cornell style note taking, and I did all the things, and I was undocumented. So my counselors didn't really know what to do with us. There was a group of about 3 or 5 of us that had openly shared to someone we were undocumented. And then AB 540 came around, which is a tuition residency exception. And then our counselors kind of left us out in the dark. They didn't, well, we couldn't fill out a FAFSA. They were like, why are you applying to college? You can't go. So we kind of just had our own little support group and applied anyway. We actually all ended up going to San Diego State. And in order for me to stay at San Diego State, so I was at San Diego State for 5 years. 3 of those years I did not receive financial aid because I was undocumented. So my parents took out some really high interest private loans. So my first immediate thought when I graduated was paying those back because they were just that amount always. I mean, with all student loan debt, but especially debt that is not your own, I just felt like I was it was a huge burden to my family. So grad school was not on my mind at all. I had been accepted to a program called the Community-Based Block Program at San Diego State for school counseling. I did finish a semester, but I did not, it was not on my mind at all. I kind of just went through it while I was working full-time at an elementary school at that time, because it was something that I thought I had committed to by just applying, but it just didn't make sense financially. So I didn't think about grad school for about 5 years. So my first job in student affairs and higher ed was as a admin assistant too, in the office of the vice chancellor for student affairs at UC San Diego. And I just really lucked out to work with a really great vice chancellor and a lot of folks in there that turned out to be my mentors, that at some point couple years in said like, hey, you should really consider going back, getting a master's. Our vice chancellor at that time was adjunct faculty at a program at San Diego State with a concentration in student affairs. So she said, so she kept bugging me, and I looked at when my GRE scores were going to be, when they were going to expire, and that was the motivation. So that 5-year mark, that was really the motivation. Financially, it was something I could swing at that time. So my journey into that was kind of like by happenstance. Like I was connected to some faculty that I thought were really great that I wanted to continue learning from. Financially, it made sense. I had a little bit more flexibility in my schedule to be able to take some classes. So that's how I decided to go into my master's program and in my doctoral program as well. So at some point, like enough people had just said, hey, have you thought about going into a doctoral program? I said, I don't think I can stop working. I have too many bills, still have some private, and then family obligations, both financial and just like time wise. And I said I couldn't commit. And that was the first time someone even mentioned an EDD, and I started just asking around. And I actually had done some work with the co-director of a joint doctoral program with the UC San Diego campus and CSU San Marcos, who I really admire and respect. And I met with him. His name is Alan Daly. And I said, like, hey, Alan, can you explain what an EDD is? I'm not really sure, even from speaking with folks, what that means. And he broke it down to me. And he he had been teaching, and he was a school counselor for a very long time before becoming a professor. And again, I really admire and respect him. And he was really one of the main reasons that I thought the timing was right, that I could really swing it, working full time, and going to school full time, and financially being able to commit to it. Mario was a huge reason too. I was like, if Mario can do it, he makes it seem so easy. It's probably not that easy. It probably means that, you know, I at least had like one other person and several other people that had done that same program. That what really stood out to me about them doing the program is I'm just going to say the words that are coming to my mind, even though they're not super finesse. They didn't look miserable. They looked happy. They still, like, I saw them There were other folks that I knew that were in some sort of either like EDD or doctor program. They never smiled. They just looked very unhappy. Mario and other folks that I knew didn't look as unhappy. They looked stressed, but they seemed happy, and I wanted to be happy, to continue being happy. So I thought like they were doing something right, or they had the right level of support to be doing something really hard, but not losing themselves or their joy in the process. And even though that wasn't something I could articulate at that time, now that I've had some time away from it, it's really, it made me feel like that was the right choice. No program is perfect, but I think I knew enough individuals that I could tap to where if I was losing parts of myself to the program or in the process, I could tap them in. So I'm sorry, I think I lost track of what the question was, but that's how my journey was. It was bumpy and it was never deliberate, but I had a lot of people helping me out. So the way I approached my search was not, it worked for me. That doesn't mean like I didn't have a list. I think when I did have a list, it consisted of like 3 things. I've never wanted to leave San Diego, so that was always a consideration as well. So again, that's what worked for me. I looked to people and how those people made me feel and how I thought those people were coming out of a process, either happy or unhappy.
Well, thanks, Belinda. I'm glad that I gave off the perception that I was not stressed. So that's good. You always have to try to have a smile on your face, I guess. But I will go next in terms of mine journey real quick, because actually a lot of it aligned, I think, with what Belinda has shared in terms of hers too, in terms of like not really having this extensive search as well. Like I knew at some point I wanted to get a doctorate. I think it was just in my nature to want to continue to pursue education. But I think also I was trying to be very realistic about it. And so I will say one of the biggest things, there's 2, I think, major impetuses for me looking at the doctorate program. One was career-wise, looking at like knowing that education acted as a barrier sometimes, and having the degree acted as a barrier in terms of being able to advance in the field. I think one of the was a big reality that I had to take into account. And so, I was always wanted to get a degree, but I think it was a time that I was like, no, I need to buckle down and like think about it and like seriously consider it. And I will say, like, it was probably the time that I was least nervous about the program. Like, I was always nervous about doing a doctorate, but I think I was like the least nervous at this time. And around the same time, like, I was hopefully transitioning down to San Diego. Both myself and my wife at the time wanted to be back in San Diego and like started to lay roots, and as we're starting to think about family and stuff like that. And so I was very specific in terms of the programs I was looking for, and I also really wanted a traditional kind of like what they call like brick and mortar experience versus like an online experience. So I was really focused on like San Diego based institutions in that search. And then around that time, a little bit before that, my mother had passed away, and one of the biggest things that she was doing right prior to her passing away was looking at doctorate programs. And so because of that, like I felt compelled to like do it. Like I felt like this, like I need to do this to complete it for my mother. And so like I think all that energy all came together for me to like be like, no, I'm going to be seriously looking at this. So then I finally got down to San Diego, and of the opportunities here, based on finances, based on what I can reasonably do, like coursework, everything like that, knowing it's like a 3-year program or 3.5-year program. The one that made most sense for me was the UC San Diego San Marcos one, the same one that, the 4 of us are all in. And I would say like it wasn't easy, but it was manageable. I think given that I was working full time as well, looking at my financial situation, looking at eventually wanting to have kids. For me, it was the one that made the most sense given those contexts, and the amount of support that I think the faculty and other students gave me during that time, I think was really helpful in terms of kind of getting through it, and even having like folks like Belinda, so I can like talk through it. And there was a colleague of myself and Moises who would come to my office from time to time, be like, hey, how's it going? And just like talking it through, I think was really helpful as well. And so Noel Salunga. And so he would like check in with me from time to time. And I think just having those things kind of like solidified like, oh, this is the right program for me. So I wouldn't say it was easy by any means. And, you know, I was definitely stressed from time to time, but it was definitely the most manageable. And because the way that they also scaffold, I feel like now we're going to start marketing for this program, but basically the way it's scaffold is like it's intended to be for full-time professionals, and there's a lot of like praxis, so it's integrated into the work that we're doing. And so I think, you know, once we went in and if we kind of knew what our dissertation topic was going to be early on, it was very much like structured in a way that it made it work for us. So but yeah, so that and that's why I think I was leaning towards that program specifically. With that said, I will pass it over to Moises.
Yeah, thanks, Mario. Yeah, I'll just kind of go a little briefly because I think mine aligns very similarly to both that were shared. But master's was very bumpy. Doctoral was very bumpy. I think for my master's program, just knowing that I came from a low income background, I really had to work a lot just to financially, you know, kind of float. I was very, very fortunate that I was able to get my undergraduate degree and my master's degree paid for through FAFSA. That was one of the big stigmas that I was very well prepared to pay for the master's, but then submitted FAFSA and then learned that you can also get grants through FAFSA by doing a master's degree. So that in collaboration with some scholarships and fellowships that I applied for, I was able to fully fund undergrad and my master's. But that was just to pay for the program. I still had to live. I still had to leave a full-time job to get a part-time GA-ship. And I quickly realized that there was no way I was going to survive on a part-time GA-ship. So I picked up a second GA-ship at Cal Poly Pomona, where I did my undergraduate degree, and didn't tell anyone because you weren't allowed to do that apparently, but I did it. So I don't know who's enforcing the rules about that. And even then, right, like even then I signed up to do like Amazon Flex and deliver packages like on the weekends and at night. And that was just my life for 2 years. And I think I just accepted it and realized that I think as I was growing as a person, I did a lot of reflection. And when I start to talk a little bit about the doctoral program, I think a lot of that reflection was these are my circumstances. I own them. I accept them. I accept that they're not fair. I accept that this is what I have to do, but this is my reality. So I need to find a way to make this work, which I think stems from a very core Latinx root of resilience. So I learned to step into that instead of avoiding that, because the academic space and my cultural space were very different. And I was like, no, I need to combine these in order to survive while I'm doing this. So with the doctoral program, I was working full time. I was better financially, so I didn't have to do multiple jobs. But through that program, I was very stubborn. I would tell the faculty no, and I would tell them, I internally told myself that I wasn't going to let the faculty determine my stress level. Because I think when you go to these like info sessions and day one of class, and they're like, don't switch jobs, don't get married, don't have kids, you're going to be stressed. And while most of that is true, it wasn't my reality, because I came from a culture of failing and resistance, and I've failed so many times, like another bad midterm wasn't going to hurt my feelings anymore. And I stepped into that, right? And it was very, very hard, because there was always that voice telling you like, you should be doing this. And then you're trying to relax, and that voice is telling you that you should be working on your dissertation. But I think for me, one of the things that helped me the most was when faculty would say, don't do these things, I would say, no, if I'm going to do it, if it's the right thing that I need to do for my life and my trajectory. And the critique I would give the faculty in our program is, by you telling me that as a first-gen doctoral student, you are the authority and I'm believing you 100%. So year one, I was like, whatever you say, like, you're the professional, I'm going to do what you tell me to do. But the problem with that was that I stunted my career growth, where there were opportunities to switch jobs before COVID, where I could have switched jobs, gotten higher pay, and gone remote. And I missed out on that opportunity because they were telling me not to switch because of the stress that it would cause on my life. And I give that feedback to them, and I continue to give that feedback to them, because I don't think it's fair for folks who are assuming the perception of what a doctoral student is to tell you what your experience is going to be in the doctoral program. So there was moments where I was like, I'm leaving to Cancun for a month and I'm not writing, and I don't care if you email me 10 times, I'm gonna do it. And I did an interview while I was in Cancun for a new job. Mario actually interviewed me for that job. So these are like those things that I feel like if no one ever tells you at the beginning that you can do, it stopped me from doing. And the way I got through those things was connecting with people who I just vibed with. And I was like, tell me your reality, tell me the truth. But then I also reflected and said, I need to stay true to my core, my cultural background, my strengths. And my strengths, in a weird way, my strength is failing, but bouncing back from failure, because I have done it during my undergrad. I had done it during my master's. There's 3 main points in our program that you're supposed to pass. I failed all 3 and I had to redo them, but I did them. And that's what I kind of leaned into a little bit. So in terms of support, it was a lot of deep reflection, and connecting with people who are doing it, and really the discipline to say, I'm gonna show up to the coffee shop and write, even if I'm only there for 5 minutes. I listen to my body, I listen to my mental health, and I would go to a coffee shop, sit down for 5 minutes and be like, nope, not today, not writing today. But on the other hand, the day that I did write, it was actually productive because I was truly listening to myself and my inner happiness and my inner mental health. And that's what really got me through it. If I could change anything, is before I started these programs, just have deeper conversations with my parents about what I'm about to experience, because it was very, very difficult having my core support no longer be my core support, because they didn't understand what I was doing in these academic spaces. And that was difficult to go through, but obviously we're here at the end, we did it, they're proud of you, but my parents still can't tell you exactly what I do as a career, and that's okay. Like, that's completely fine. So I hope that answered most of the question.
No, that's perfect. That makes me think of like 2 things. One, we're always teachers. At least my dad will always refer to him as a teacher, regardless of my position or anything like that. And the other thing is, I remember there was a conversation with Moises in the hallway once that I was like, no, you have to go to happy hours. Like, I remember like telling him, like, during the doctorate thing, we were talking about the whole balance. And I was like, no, like at the end of the day, you will always go to happy hour still. And there was many happy hour that we still went to. With that said, I'll pass it over to Claudia.
I don't know if I have much to add, but I will try. I'm just trying to think of, I guess my search wasn't that long ago. And to be honest, I don't know if I did much of a search. And I think it also had to one of those, like, it had to do with the fact that like I wasn't sure where exactly I wanted to go in education in general. And I think that's also why it took me some time between like my master's and specifically like this program a while to even apply. And I was also going through like that part of like, do I really need the doctorate? And like, do I really want it? And I wanted to make sure that like I actually did want it, because I was like, that's a lot of time to put in. And at this point too, like I have 2 kids and they're pretty young. And I think that was like the biggest reason as to like to really think about like wanting to do the program or not. But then it was the biggest reason to do the program. So I think for my search, I had to be local for sure. And that's like one of the reasons why like I wanted to keep like, I guess, around. I didn't want to relocate my family necessarily. I mean, I guess I did consider like a few other ones, but they were like the Zoom like or virtual programs, and it wasn't necessarily something I wanted to do either, because I feel like I wouldn't push myself enough to be like actually doing things if I was virtual, just because it didn't necessarily feel real. But then obviously like COVID happened and most of my program ended up being virtual anyway. But it was great because regardless, like I still met like really great people who were people that were nearby and who I was able to go give mimosas with. Sinai was one of the people that in the program with me. And so I think like that actually is what like kept me going too, is the fact that although it was a virtual experience, and I was looking for an in-person experience when I was doing research, the community aspect is like truly what it came down to. And it didn't matter if it was like on Zoom or like in our own way, kind of like making our own community outside of the program itself. And so I think that that's truly what it was. And then obviously finances has a big part of like to do with everything, because I had to keep a job, especially with the kids. It's really expensive too to, keep them happy, healthy, and moving forward, and just like having a good childhood. So that really is what also like kind of determined what program that I would like do. So one, I wouldn't have to relocate because that's expensive. And then two, just like being able to keep a job. So I'd say like, yeah, those were the three things that like I would pay attention to, and the community aspect, because I didn't touch too much on my master's, but that's also the reason why I chose my master's program too, is because it was cohort based, and at least like there would be a little bit like more of a community as like going through grad school. So yeah.
Thank you, Claudia. And that actually, I think, lends well to where we're going next in terms of Sinai's question related to, and folks have touched upon this already, but what resources did you find most helpful in considering doctorate programs? Because I know and if folks want to chime in about like some financial support or just like finding time and getting support from folks. I think Moises, you alluded this with like your parents, but also just expectations of us from others, like employers, as well as like, at that time, like our partners, and just not that I don't have that partner at this time. I just mean like at the, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, so like at that time, like having a conversation about like finding balancing that stuff, I think that's not like necessarily financial or time resources, but have helped definitely during the process. I will say though, the biggest resource, and Moises and Claudia both alluded to this as well, and even Belinda in her response, but like just the people. I think our culture, and this came up in my dissertation in terms of advancement when it comes to Latino student first professionals, but like our culture is embedded in community and relationships, and so I think that is actually really important as a resource that we don't necessarily account for in terms of what gets us through these programs, and where we're considering it, but also as we're thinking about like staying in the program, right? I think that's part of it. I think also with those relationships, and this is something I saw in my dissertation as well, but there's a certain amount of social capital that's associated to that, of how to navigate either a doctoral search, the doctoral process. I remember having a conversation once with Moises where I like found this like nugget information of like folks bring snacks to their like defense and dissertations, which I never had heard about. And so, but I did it, and I was glad because people were like well fed and they were like really positive in terms of my defenses. And that's something I told Moises. I was like, make sure you have food at your defenses, because, and granted, I think they were virtual at that point, but that's one thing I told him early on. It's like those little nuggets of like social capital that we don't know unless we go through the program. And especially for our community, because there's such low numbers, it's hard sometimes to find other people who are like you who will give this information to you. So I think oftentimes the folks that are ones in there, the ones that are thriving, are the folks that are getting this information from their parents, their family, people who have been in doctoral programs before. And so one of the biggest things I found is my community was really important for me to get that information that I didn't know about. I told Belinda early on, like, here's how, if you go in kind of like an idea, this is how you can work through how I can like still have a smile on my face is like, this is how you can get it done in 3.5 years. If you like, stagger your calendar in that way and your schedule. They don't tell you that until you go through it, or like, you don't know that until you go through it. So I think that's super helpful, is having folks who are going through a program to be able to give you those like nuggets and pieces of information. Does anybody else want to take a stab at this question?
Yeah, I'll add on. So yeah, I would say the same. I think as far as like technical resources, I think that changes from year to year, just because I think one of the lessons that I hope we've all learned at the period of the pandemic where we're at now is that everything can change from one day to the other. So, taking food to dissertation was advice that I got, and I was really looking forward to it. I already had the menu picked out, and then the day before my proposal defense, it was switched to Zoom. So anyway, all that to say, I think people, and specifically, I would say make a list, like someone, and trust people that you trust, right? That you can be your authentic self with, that you can be really vulnerable with. Someone who is in your program, someone who is not in your program, someone who understands fully what you're doing in the program, someone who has no idea and is probably going to say you're a teacher after the program to take you to Cancun, to make sure that you go to happy hours, someone that knew you before the program, someone that knows you after. So all of those people, I think, really make for a balanced experience to make sure like their checks, they're you know, they're like checks and balances to make sure that you're staying authentically you and to yourself, and making sure that you're doing what makes sense for you, not necessarily what your program or your advisor or your chair is telling you to do, because they know maybe like that one aspect of you.
And I could follow up with that. I just noticed the time limits that we had. So with my undergrad journey and everything, it was just, I'm a first gen to college graduate. And so it was also a challenge as well, knowing which way to navigate. And then I changed career trajectories from starting out as my undergrad in bio, switching over as a transfer student to going into psychology, doing that. And if it wasn't for the fact that I met a mentor as an undergrad and who told me about research and told me that having a bachelor's in psychology was not enough for me, I would need to go on to graduate school, I wouldn't have known. I thought that was enough. And this is coming from someone that was in the honors program since high school. So, you know, it can be a challenge. I'm the daughter of migrant farm workers and immigrants. And so this is one thing, and then coming from a small rural town to leaving to go to UC Irvine, it was a big change and a huge shift and adjustment that you have to experience. But then telling my family, like, guess what? I'm going to have to pick up and move to somewhere where I can afford to go to graduate school. And I actually had to leave the state, and it wasn't feasible for me, but I had to do it in order to get funding as a master's student in counseling psychology at the time. So I went and did that really quickly. One of the things I learned through mentorship and through the folks that I met along the way, going to school at University of Wisconsin-Madison for my master's in counseling psych, leaving there when I was done to go to another counseling psych doctoral program in Washington State, and then coming back to California, was that you need to create an academic family. And there's research on it. Dr. Castellanos and my mentor, which is my mentor to this day, and my advisor, Alberta Gloria, they both talk about the research and how important it is for especially BIPOC, first generation, and Latino, Latinx students to have an academic family, which is reflective of our own cultural communities that we come from. We're from a collectivistic culture, we're going into higher ed, and it's from an individualistic culture. So there's going to be a clash, and we're going to feel like we don't belong there. And so for us, it's very important that we do that, where we create our academic family. And several of you talked about that. You had people at your university that you had to check in with to tell you to go and connect with each other in one way or another. It was difficult for me, you know, being the youngest in my family, to go on to college and to leave the state into a place where I never knew anyone, and to be faced head on with discrimination. Like once I got to Wisconsin, that was a challenge in itself that I wanted to quit so many times. So I will tell you all that you do need to create that academic family, and it doesn't have to be just your community of like the same culture. Create it with people that are from diverse cultural backgrounds, because then you get a chance to learn about the world around you. You get a chance to learn about each other's difficulties and challenges in higher ed and how to help one another. I mean, I created our community there, and that was really helpful for me to this day. And then I did that when I had to move again to Washington State, and it wasn't easy. It was not inexpensive, even though I went to states that were, or universities that were less costly than other places. And then when coming back to California, I changed routes again from counseling psych to educational leadership. And I did that with the challenge because I was like, I need to finish my doctoral degree. I didn't finish I was ABD in counseling psych. What am I going to do? You know, and it's always a challenge. You still encounter this. It's all about who you know type of thing, not about your education or experience. And coming back to California was disheartening, having to face that reality, especially as a Latina, Indigenous identified woman that is coming to the state and having to be turned away, even with all this overqualification and experience from out of state, because I did not know the people at those universities or did not have friends that worked in higher places like them. And so that's the social capital that we talk about. We don't understand it too well, and that's what we have to navigate through. And so being both that and a transfer student from a community college, I mean, it comes with all kinds of challenges. And that's why for me, I've mentored students indirectly or formally, but I've mentored students along the way because it's my way to pay it forward. That's what my mentor taught me. That's what I intend to teach other students, is to help one another, because we don't get to our place on our own. We don't get here to become doctores and doctors here on our own. We have some group, some community to help us. Like it takes a village to get us here. And so I want to impart that knowledge with you all because thank you again for having this space that we had. I just barely found out about this event today and I wasn't exactly sure about it. I was like, oh, let me just join it. I have lunch hour, I'll go and join it. So thank you for allowing us this space. And for those of you that are in doctoral programs, like hang in there no matter how tough it gets, because there's going to be times that it challenges you. I was ready to quit a few times. So hang in there and create that community amongst each other.
Thank you, Dr. Martinez. But I think we are at time. So I think we'll go ahead and wrap up our portion. Yeah, and so if Daniel, you want to take it from here?
Yeah. Well, first, very special thank you to all of our presenters, Claudia, Belinda, Mario, and Moises. Very beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing on your educational and professional journeys. I hope folks were able to either reflect on their own journeys and find community and shared struggles, or took some major takeaways to be able to share with either peers, students, or those interested in those programs and those journeys as well. So we greatly appreciate you all holding the space. Thank you all for being here as well, Dr. Martinez. I appreciate you sharing some of your story as well. We are having more programs this month too, so feel free to join on those. I'm actually going to drop into the chat our links for our feedback on our session today. If you're able to share, that would be great for us to improve sessions for the future, as well as our other sessions coming up this month. So our next session is actually on Thursday, which is also being hosted by Mario as well. Taking your next step, navigating the grad school search on Thursday at the same time. So feel free to come by if you want, or feel free to share with folks, especially students who are interested in going to grad school. I know that will be a great opportunity for folks there. But yeah, I think that's everything. Thank you all again for being here. We appreciate everyone, and we look forward to seeing you in future sessions.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Bye,
you.
y'all.
Thank you.